joined now by someone who began his life as an actor, working perhaps most notably on Potter's Picture Palace, but he's since moved into publishing as well as songwriting for various musicals. So I would like to introduce Eden Phillips. How are you?
Hello, Alex. Nice to talk to you.
And how are you? You keeping busy?
Yeah, I'm keeping quite busy. Doing a bit of working from home, a bit of working in the office. London still is pretty much deserted, but no, I'm keeping well, thank you.
Good. Well, I wanted to take you back to what was probably a busier time for London, 1979, when you worked on Doctor Who. How aware were you of the show before working on it?
Well, it had been running for a long time when I was asked to do it, and I have a feeling that it was a kind of joke between me and the casting director, because the episode was called Nightmare of Eden, or Nightmare for Eden, or Eden's a Nightmare, or something. And so I did it against the wishes of my agent. But even friends in those days said, it's a dreadful thing to think of now, but you're not going to do Doctor Who, as in how naff, whereas of course now I feel very proud to be in that band of people who've done it over so many years. But it's only in the last sort of decade that it's been reinvented as this global smash hit. So it was considered quite small beer at the time, and of course I had the tiniest part in it, so that was the smallest of the smallest beer. But I'm sorry to say I've never seen that episode, and I remember very little about it, apart from wandering down corridors which seemed endless, but were very cleverly rearranged into L shapes, so it looked like we were walking a long way, but actually we were just retracing our steps. And that's pretty much all I remember about it, I'm sorry to say, except that when I came out of BBC Television Centre, I discovered that Earl Mountbatten had been murdered, blown up by the IRA. So that dates it in my mind much more, that particular day, than doing the episode. And I think it was the last time I acted for money in front of a camera.
That wasn't a deliberate result of Doctor Who, or was that just how your career progressed?
No, I did do other theatre things, but really, even though I was only 30 at the time, my career was pretty much behind me. And I'd worked quite a lot before that, and doing larger parts and things on stage and on television. But I had a feeling at the time that unless you want to act more than anything else in the world, the best thing to do is to get out and leave room for people who do want to do that. And so various things happened. My parents got sick and died, and I found I got stage fright on stage a lot. So I thought, well, the thing to do is to get out and give up. So I think after that Doctor Who, I did one stage performance in a show called Follow the Star, I think, which is a musical. And then I gracefully retired. And then I became the oldest office boy in London when I went to work for publishers.
Something like Doctor Who, you came in for one of the four parts. I assume you'd have had the week's rehearsal before the recording it on the Saturday.
I think we probably did, but again, my memory escapes me. I don't remember any rehearsals at all. I can picture the studio now and the set and standing behind the set and things like that, but I don't remember even being in the dressing room. I don't remember rehearsing, though we must have done. I mean, probably my part didn't need any rehearsal, but there were lots of serious actors being serious about acting, and I'm sure I was there, if only to fall down when I was shot, which you told me earlier on that that's what happened to me.
Yeah, because if you're going to do a Doctor Who, I suppose if you don't get to go in the TARDIS, you want to be menaced by a Doctor Who monster, and you did just that.
Or even say hello to the actual Doctor Who, because I don't recall interfacing with, was it Tom Baker? Yes. I'm sure I must have seen him across a crowded studio, but he certainly didn't pay any attention to me, quite rightly. So he didn't save me, and he didn't kill me, and he didn't talk to me.
Yeah, no, you sadly die at the hands of the mandrill whilst trying to do your duty. But what a way to go.
Well, maybe if there's a way of doing it, I'll look it up and watch it sometime. It'd be hideously embarrassing. It's quite embarrassing watching a program called Potter's Picture Palace, in which I played the eponymous Peter Potter, and I do have quite a lot of those episodes. And some I find are okay, but some are extremely embarrassing. The most embarrassing one is where we had to do a retake. So they looked in the takes afterwards, and there's a scene where I walk through a door, and the next shot is the other side of the door. So they said we'd finished. We went for drinks because the hospitality at the BBC in those days was unbelievable. So I had far too much to drink, and they said, sorry, we need a retake. So you see on the programme, me opening the door one side, absolutely fine. And the next scene, when I come in there, I'm absolutely smashed, having walked through a door. But that was fun. That was made up in Manchester. But that was quite a long time before I did Doctor Who. I think that was probably in 1974, 75. So 4 or 5 years before Doctor Who, before I did Doctor Who.
And in terms of television, that must have been probably one of your largest acting roles, you know, as the title character.
Yes, I think it was, yes. I once played Rodney Bewes' brother in a thing at Yorkshire Television called Dear Mother Love Albert, which I think has now been consigned to distant memory. And Rodney, sadly, is no longer with us. But he and I bonded very well because we were both big Chelsea fans.
So was the television, and I suppose particularly the BBC, an exciting place to be in the 70s? Because, you know, you had introduction of other channels, colour, it was all happening.
Television was extremely exciting to me, and I think to most actors as well. And the other thing that I do remember, because I'm reminded of every year, is in those days the contracts with actors were very beneficial to the actors, in as much as you got repeat fees and fees for sales, which I don't think happens any longer. And so I still get several checks every year for Doctor Who and Potter's Picture Palace, which reminds me of them. But it also makes me think, if I get as much as that for playing in 3 episodes of Doctor Who, how much are the Doctor Who's getting? They must be earning an absolute fortune sitting on their bum somewhere, and good luck to them.
And do you find Doctor Who is something that it comes back to every now and again? Do people get in touch, you know, like I did, and ask you about it?
Well, occasionally. It hasn't happened for a couple of years, but for quite a long time, people found me by the post, and they would have found a picture of me or something to do with it, and they would send it, nearly always with a pen, and ask me to, and a stamped addressed envelope, and ask me to sign it and return it to them. And sometimes with a request for any memories I have, which, as you well know, I have very few of, but I was more than happy to sign. But again, it was a bit like the royalty payments and sales fees. You're thinking, well, if I'm getting 3 or 4 a year, what are the serious players getting?
And do you get that interest from any of your other acting work?
A little bit for having been in Coronation Street, but only a little bit. But apart from that, I mean, nobody's heard of Potter's Picture Palace. Nobody's heard of A Family at War, which was a Granada series I was in. I died in that one as well, in the desert, on the beach at Formby near Liverpool. But no, I think, you know, if people still say, "Were you in Doctor Who?" and they say, you know, there's definitely a wow factor there.
Did you say Potter's Picture House was, you know, a fantastic kids series? You had Melvin Hayes. You know, it had a very, by the looks of it, fun company to work with. Was it a nice one to go into?
Yes, it was very nice. We all got on extremely well and had a good time. I was very lucky to get the part because I lied at the audition and said, when they said, "Have you got a driving license?" I said yes, which I didn't. And then to my horror, episode 1, scene 1 was me driving into a car wash. And so then, you know, but it was too late for them to fire me by that point. So then I think probably in episode 1 you can still see the feet behind the car, the people pushing me into the car wash. But it got better after that. They didn't write anything where I had to drive.
And had you done a lot of comedy before that?
Not really, no. I mean, I wasn't the comedy bit. I was really the straight man to the other comics. So I didn't need to have, you know, any acting needs reasonably good timing, but I didn't need to be a real jokesmith. I mean, Melvin Hayes, who you mentioned, did that. And a very nice actor called David Lodge, who was in nearly all the Pink Panther films, because he was big friends with Peter Sellers, who made sure he was cast. And an actor called John Comer, who went on to do Last of the Summer Wine, who sadly died a few years ago. But Melvin's the only one I still keep vaguely in touch with. And he's still going strong at 80 something, I think.
Yes, still busy working, yes.
Is he? Yeah.
But I was intrigued, your degree in drama was from Manchester, and a lot of your work, things like Coronation Street, Potter's Picture Palace, Crown Court, are dramas that were done at the time in the regions up north. Was that something you found yourself known as a northern actor?
I didn't particularly get cast in northern parts, I don't think, but of course it was quite handy for all of us because I was still living in Manchester after graduating. So I was quite convenient and they didn't need to pay travel expenses and hotels, so I could nip off to Leeds to do Yorkshire Television or down the road to Granada or BBC, although BBC only had a very small studio in those days out in Rusholme, I think it was, a converted church, where they did things like Call My Bluff. But I don't think there was, yes, of course, I should remember. Yes, we do. I don't know, we shot Potter's Picture Palace in the studios in Oxford Road. I don't know if they're still there. Yeah, of course we did. And that's where the lavish hospitality was.
But before moving into acting and going to Manchester to train, am I right in thinking you'd been the youngest head flyman in the West End?
Yes, I was a super stagehand. I started there when I was about 16 and worked my way up and met all sorts of extraordinary people. I once was directed as a stagehand by Harold Pinter in a play he directed called The Man in the Glass Booth, where the set was made out of steel and it had a lift that opened and closed where people came on. And the idea of the steel set was that this lift door would bang and shut. But being Pinter, of course, it didn't just get pulled open and shut. He was directing every cue. Oh, sorry, the light's gone off. Can you still see me? And so the cast, it was starring Donald Pleasance, and the cast would stand there for ages while Harold Pinter rehearsed me cue by cue. So on this one, I wanted to open very slowly and then close with a snap. No, that isn't a snap. Do it again. Like open and close with a snap. That's it. Okay, that's cue 41. And on we would go. But I met all sorts of extraordinary people. I met more famous people as a stagehand than I ever did as an actor.
So from a young age then, you're sort of immersed in this world of theatre and actors. Had that always been the intention?
I loved theatre from a very young age, yes. I remember going to see Julian Slade's Salad Days in the 1950s, as so many people did, and I gather that's what started Cameron Mackintosh's love affair with the theatre as well, because he and I are roughly contemporaries. He a tad more successful, but never mind. And I think, I loved it from then. That's why I went to work as a stagehand in school holidays and then between school and university. And I really enjoyed that. And I suppose I used to stand in the wings and watching wonderful actors and then thinking my arrogance, well, I could do better than that. To which they would probably think, well, piss off and do it then, which is what I did.
And so is that where that your love of theatre and I suppose particularly musicals began? Because theatre in the 60s must have been a fantastic environment to be in.
It was really exciting. And of course, we all drank like fish as well. I mean, that these days shows are so finely tuned technically. I would imagine that everyone has to be very computer literate and completely sober. But in those days, we would time it. You could go, is this a half pint gap between cues or is it a pint? And we'd all go pining around to the pub. It's amazing nobody was killed. It was slightly more difficult if you're up in the flyers because you had further to go to get to the pub. But then again, what you were doing was rather more dangerous.
So after your encounter with Doctor Who, you say you moved into publishing and songwriting. Was that something you'd always wanted to do, or was it just sort of the right place and the right time?
No, it was really that when I decided I had to give up, I asked all my friends outside theatre and show business if they had any ideas. And I didn't have very many friends who weren't in it. But somebody said, oh, I know they're looking for a runner at a publisher called Marshall Cavendish. So I went down there and applied for that. So at the age of 31 or something, I became the oldest office boy in London and worked my way up through that company. So almost exactly 10 years after starting as the office boy, I became the editorial director. And then I moved from Marshall Cavendish to another publishing company, which is then called Orbis. It's now called the Agostini. And at both of those, we did the part work collections I was talking about and moved on from there. But I had no burning ambition to work in publishing at all. I enjoyed it, and I realized that I was probably much better suited to it, actually being able to spell and punctuate, than I was as an actor, where spelling and punctuation are not essential, useful but not essential, whereas in publishing, it's the other way around. And also the other way around, sometimes, of course, you need to do a bit of acting as well, particularly if you're controlling or managing or running large departments of people. Because at one time, Marshall Cavendish was a very big company, and I had probably 70, 80 people in my department. So you need a certain amount of acting skills to keep everybody happy and productive there. Yeah.
And you were saying just before we started recording that, yeah, the publishing side of things, you still have sort of encounters with television and film work through things like Carry On, Part Works, and all sorts of series. So is it quite nice to, I suppose, for a period of time, be immersed in those worlds of, Carry On or something else?
It was wonderful from the other perspective, because I didn't need to do any acting. I just needed to sort things out. But I think part work publishing, I mean, I don't know if anybody who's watching this knows what a part work is, but, a collection of magazines was sold in the newsagent with a DVD attached. But it's a bit like acting to me. It's one of the things I don't want to do again, but I'm very glad I did at the time. And that obtains with acting as well. I mean, I had a wonderful time doing both of them, but I really wouldn't want to go back to it again. I wouldn't mind going back to acting, but nobody would ask me. But I certainly don't want to go back to grinding out weekly part works again. No, it's hard work.
That must be the joy of what you do now, that you're working with different magazines, different publishers, all different genres. Is there an element that you specialise in? I don't know, home design, or do you specialise, or as a publisher, are you across everything?
Well, when I was a publisher, it was basically part works. Since leaving that and forming my own company about 20 years ago, we've taken, obviously, whatever has come to us. So it's been quite varied. Yes, the experience in part works, well, they lasted. But we also moved in, particularly, I suppose, the specialism in terms of photography and design to do with wine, because our biggest client is Laithwaite, which manages Sunday Times Wine Club. So we used to do a lot of photography, editorializing, brochures, special offers, that kind of thing for them. But we've worked for all sorts of people, the Folio Society, can't think of any others, but Dogs Trust, charities, Royal Albert Hall. We did some fundraising brochures for the Royal Albert Hall and the Royal Academy of Arts, which raised their money. So it's been much more varied with my own company than it has when I was a publisher.
And with something like that, are you then across the digital side of things as well, or is it very much just the side in print?
Well, with the wine, yes. So the cards that we produced to go in the wine boxes were also the same, pretty much the same as what would go on the website. But that's one of the reasons that my business has shrunk quite considerably, is that it's the transfer, as everyone's doing less and less print and paper, more and more online. And so although we have contributed to that, it's less and less. And also the clients can manage the online digital stuff just as well, if not better, in-house. And so quite a lot of clients that put a lot of work out to us now are very sensibly taking the task back into their offices.
And perhaps initially when you were sort of making that transition between acting and publishing, you did a lot of songwriting, and is that something that continues today?
Yeah, well, I write musicals, and I never think of that as songwriting, but of course it is. Yes, I've really enjoyed that. I've worked with everyone from Julian Slade, who wrote Salad Days, was the first thing, so I was very lucky to write a musical with him. but I think I've written 5 or 6 musicals, and it may say something about me as a collaborator, but I don't think I've ever done a musical with the same composer twice. So, so they probably think, oh God, not him again. But so I did a Nancy Mitford musical with Julian Slade. I wrote the musical of Alfie with a composer called John Cameron. I'm currently working on, or was when the crisis hit us, trying to get produced a musical called The Postman and the Poet, which is based on the novel which formed the basis for the film Il Postino, which is probably I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a bit like a sort of Cyrano de Bergerac. It's where the poet Pablo Neruda, who's a real person, teaches a fictional boy how to woo in poetry so he can get the girl. And the film was set in an Italian island after World War II. The novel, which we're following, was set in Chile during either side of the Pinochet coup. So there's a political element to it as well as the love story. And in March, we were due to have a meeting, me and my composing partner, Michael Jeffrey, and our agent, Jean Diamond, were due to have a meeting with somebody who was a producer, who had a contact, who'd got money, who wanted to invest in a musical like this. And the meeting was going to be on March the 20th, and of course it never happened. And theatre will never be the same again, particularly with new musicals. So I think I can probably say goodbye to that for the foreseeable future.
But with any project, I suppose, particularly musicals, are you asked to work on an existing idea, or is it more a case that you will devise something yourself and then interest others?
The latter, yes. I mean, I wish I were eminent enough for people to say, oh yes, let's get him to do the lyrics, the way that they might say with Don Black or Tim Rice. But no. Incidentally, going back to acting, when I was in a production of Joseph, which I did almost literally thousands of performances of, one of them, I shared a dressing room with Tim Rice, who for 6 weeks played the part in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat that he'd written for himself and never played, which is the role of Pharaoh. So for 6 weeks we shared a dressing room. He played Pharaoh. He'd never played it before, and he never played it again. And he was very naughty because he'd written this part where he went on before the end of Act 1 and not at all in Act 2. I was playing the narrator, who was in both acts. And at the interval, he'd say, oh, go on, have another port and brandy. It's good for your voice. So again, it was a bit like the Potter's Picture Palace. I was absolutely fine in Act 1 and rather less steady during Act 2. But the words of that musical, get into your head, and I could probably, don't ask me to, I could probably still recite every single colour that goes in red and green and yellow and black and scarlet and peach and all that to this day. But Tim, in a way, sort of inspired me with the idea of writing lyrics. I mean, not directly. He said, "Why don't you write lyrics, dear boy?" But getting to know him and like him, because he's such a nice, generous, open man. Yes, it certainly was kind of connected. I think it was probably admiring Sondheim that made me want to write lyrics, actually.
So is there anyone that you say particularly have learned from in terms of the writing side of things, or is it more an admiration and appreciation of others?
No, you learn a lot, I think, and of course you learn better as you do in anything else by actually trying to do it. So to begin with, you start off thinking, oh, I want to be like Sondheim, and then you realise he's a genius and you can't possibly, but you make your own way of doing it and learning from that. But what I really like about writing lyrics, I mean, apart from working with composers, which I do, and I don't mind whether it's lyrics first or music first, but the satisfaction, which is why I don't think of it as songwriting, the satisfaction is, think of the character, where have they been, where have they going, right in their idiom, in their character, and that is very satisfying. But I think the chances of getting other productions of anything that I write in musical theatre, for the next few years are really quite small. Alfie's had a few productions over the years, but won't have another one for a while.
Well, I suppose for that character progression, you're again pulling on your acting work. So it seems very much that you at no point are you turning your back on anything. It all feeds into each other, which must be a fantastic way to work.
Well, It's interesting you say that. I've never thought of it like that, but looking back instantly on that, I can see what you mean. That there is a sort of reverse pattern to it, but it never seemed to be like that at the time. I always took whatever was going and carried on until it stopped, really. So that'll be my epitaph. He took everything and then died. But I've got a few years left in me yet, but I'll just see which way the wind blows. But I'm also writing my memoirs during of my time as a stagehand. Maybe I mentioned that before. You see, I'm rambling now.
And how has that been then, looking back at the very start of it all then?
Well, it's a name dropper's paradise. But of course, I stopped being a stagehand in 1975, I think. So more and more of the people that I'm writing about are dying, which lessens and lessens the likelihood of label suits. But although I'm trying to be as truthful as I can, memory does play terrible tricks on one. But I am being as truthful as I can. But you know, some of the people, maybe I shouldn't mention, maybe I will, who are extremely unpopular with stagehands. One of them was Max Bygraves. And I was quite careful when I started writing about him, but he's now quite long dead, so I can now tell the truth. But he was not a popular man. Do you know who I mean?
Yes, yeah. Mm. Well, it certainly sounds like something to look forward to then. And how far through the project are you? Are you near a first draft with this?
Well, I've done about 30,000 words, and people that know these things say you need 40,000 to make a small book. So I'm going to carry on till I've got to 40,000. There's plenty to say, but some of it's very dull. I mean, sometimes, you know, productions and get-ins and get-outs, as you will know, Alex, can be very exciting, traumatic, and lots of things to say. But if you're sitting on not on the book, if you're on the prop table on a long-running straight play with 4 actors and 2 sets, you know, not a lot happens. And so I've tried to focus it around the exciting bits and certainly the exciting people. I mean, being directed by Harold Pinter, there's not many stagehands who can say that. Or indeed being directed by Lionel Blair, who used to come up to the fly tower at the Victoria Palace when we were doing something for Max Bygraves, quite unnecessarily, to encourage us to pull the right ropes at the right time. He did perfectly well done it through the tannoy, but anyway, he liked to come and visit us, bless him. I don't think he'd climb all the way up the way there now, but 40 years ago it wasn't so bad.
So through the process of writing about your early work, does it make you approach being the sort of almost the other side of it now as a composer differently?
I don't link it in my mind with composing or writing musicals at all. I link it in my mind with having a jolly good time with lots of fantastic people in loads of great pubs, quite honestly. And the camaraderie of that, I think, was even greater than the camaraderie of the best acting companies.
Well, I think that's a lovely note to end on. And we've touched upon just some of your work, Eden, but I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time.
Well, it's been great to allow me to name drop and talk about myself. I don't often get that opportunity. Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much.